Good morning for everyone in the U.S. It's noon here in Santiago, Chile, where I'm based. And as Joaquin and Felipe mentioned, we'd like to start with a big thank you for joining us today in this first call, where I hope to give a little bit of an overview of what we're doing at CMPC in terms of sustainability. This is an area that is a division, as an area of the company, was created roughly around 5 years ago. And to really give a broad understanding of what sustainability means in our operations, in our products, and in our extended value chain. But really, sustainability goes back, I would say, at CMPC several decades, starting perhaps in the forestry operations with FSC and PEFC certifications for sustainable forestry management, etc. So this is not something new. It's just something that I think we're organizing, and we're trying to create a real bond between what this sustainability strategy is and what the business strategy is, which we hope to blend into really one comprehensive strategy in coming years. So Felipe, we can go to the next slide. This is what we're going to be talking briefly about today. And I really like to open up to questions and Q&A at the end. I think that's the most value of today's conversation, is really understanding what things are relevant in your own individual situations, and your own relationships, and your own development in terms of products and services as well. So we'll have a bit of an in-depth look at CMPC's sustainability strategy. Look at some goals and targets that we've set ourselves in some key focus areas. We'll talk a little bit about how sustainability really hits on operations, hits on products, and hits on value chain. And I also want to talk a little bit about sector initiatives, because we believe that it's very important to achieve more sustainable outcomes through collaboration and international global partnerships, which we've been a member of, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we're doing in that space. And lastly, and with a few perspectives of where sort of we see the future of the company and the future of our relationships with clients around the world sort of moving towards, and how sustainability is a increasing factor in those relationships. So as I mentioned earlier, today the strategy of sustainability at CMPC is really part of the business strategy. This is not a CSR strategy that runs in parallel. This is really one of 5 key elements of the company's business strategy, where we have productivity, efficient growth, people, and innovation as 4 of these key elements, and sustainability being sort of that 5th. So it's at the center of the business strategy of the company. Now, our approach, our approach sort of stems off of what we've developed in recent years as our corporate purpose, which we call the 3 C's. You can see these words there on the left side of the screen, where we have conserve, where we have create, and where we have coexist. These 3 C's in a way embed what we do as members of this company, beyond just generating revenue in the company, why we do what we do, and what we stand for. So we've aligned this corporate purpose with sort of the global agenda. Unfortunately, it seems like these slides are slightly cut off. I don't know if it's my screen, but the global agenda, the sustainable development goals, have sort of drafted a roadmap of those challenges that we're facing as humanity, and in areas that we need to work towards as we look at 2030. And this is an invitation for not only states, but also institutions in the private sector and really the general public to work towards, closing these gaps in areas so diverse as poverty, as access to water, as life on land and in water, responsible production and consumption, etc. So I also mentioned that we've set some pretty ambitious sustainability goals. I'll show them in a few slides, and I think that's a way to really making tangible sort of these somewhat intangible ideas and concepts, where you can have fantastic missions and values and corporate purposes, but what does that really mean in terms of our operations and what we do as a company? That's, I think, where the goals fit in. And we have I think a very good set of long and medium term goals that we'll touch very shortly on. The whole idea of value creation is increasingly a term that in the corporate world is coming and is sort of top of mind, where companies are seen as really relevant actors of well-being in societies. How do we contribute to people's well-beings, along with the role that states and governments, of course, have? But we're going a little bit past that idea that companies just generate, well-being through the products and services they deliver, but also in how they achieve. How do you get to those products and services is as important. And how do you create value, broader value within your value chain, local communities, clients, suppliers, etc. We believe that transparent reporting is very important, and we've called this talk today, sort of the presentation, our sustainability report or our integrated report. You can find both of those in our website, and we'll make sure to send out the links. But we believe that there's a lot of work to do. We're definitely not perfect in many of these things that we're going to talk about today, but at least we want to make sure that we're providing a clear roadmap of where we are today and how we plan to achieve those best practices and that sort of excellence in the areas that we believe that we have most impact in. Of course, we do believe that we're doing some great stuff in other areas, and we are leading in certain aspects, and we'd like to highlight those as well. And finally, what are known as material aspects, material issues, are extremely relevant because in a way it tells you what the sort of broader stakeholder base of the company thinks of important matters in their relationship with our company, with CMPC. These might be governments or economic aspects, they might be social, they might be environmental, but we want to make sure that this is not a closed vision of what only we believe we should be doing, but also what matters to our broader sort of stakeholder base, whether it's investors, whether it's shareholders, again, clients, authorities, suppliers, etc., our neighbors in our operations. So I think this sort of sets the context of our sustainability strategy, just to begin with sort of where we are and what we're thinking and what elements sort of comprise that strategy. So I think I don't want to stay very long here, but I think it's very important to make sure that the right governance is in place, especially in companies like ours. We are a publicly listed company, and a pretty large company, especially for the sort of the standards of Latin America and Chile. And we wanted to make sure that this strategy had a sounding and a robust governance behind it. So in late 2019, we formed a committee at a board level. You can see the members of that committee, and we meet on a bi-monthly basis. And the goal here is to really oversee the implementation of this strategy and ensure that we are on track for meeting our goals, our objectives, and really delivering on that roadmap that we've set out to achieve. We want to make sure that, we are looking at those highest standards in terms of governance, in terms of certifications, in terms of how to report, how do we measure, how do we engage. This is not, in-house made stuff. We want to make sure that we are aligned with the best practices and standards out there globally. Of course, some very sort of basic yet important things that we need to call out is that, all the laws and regulations in each country where we operate are a minimum. This doesn't mean that by meeting those laws and regulation, we are per se a sustainable company, but it certainly means that we need to at least start with that. It's a necessary component of any sustainability strategy in the corporate world. And of course, I think respect for people in terms of human rights, labor rights, etc., and respect for government are, of course, things that are key and at the center of what this committee is looking at, and how, again, we construct these roadmaps looking at the future. So this is a very busy and crowded slide. The intention here is not for you folks to understand what's in each one of these. It's really just to get the broader picture of what we've called our value creation model. As you might know, CMPC is a vertically integrated company, so we own everything from forest assets and nurseries all the way to B2C businesses like our tissue business Softies. Therefore, there's some really interesting interactions within the different subsidiaries and business units of the company, with sort of these cascading opportunities that go from circular economy opportunities where we're using byproducts of certain plants as inputs for other of our operations, and at the same time really trying to understand how we have the ability to create value in all these different links within this vertical integration. We have our company and our purpose at the center, and we have what are known as sort of inputs of this value creation model, which have to do with financial capital, manufacturer capital, intellectual, human, natural, social capital. All these are inputs into our value creation model. And as outputs, we have, all the products and services, we have innovation, we have all the different goals and objectives that we set out in terms of sustainability. And of course, we have an ambition in terms of what we expect to see as an output in terms of a company that really is creating this sort of ecosystem of value creation. This diagram you will find in our sustainability report. So I'd encourage everyone to perhaps go in, take a look. We'd love to get feedback in terms of if this makes sense, if there's some aspects of this that are new to you that you were perhaps not aware of how we operate, and what are the things that we sort of considered as the key activities within the operations of CMPC. So I think when we look at sustainability specifically in our operations, this begins with understanding negative impacts and risks, right? So the first step is, let's make sure that we are not negatively impacting both social environment and the environmental environment that surrounds our company. Yet at the same time, we want to look at sort of this glass half full and say, well, there is also huge business opportunities, and there's also positive impacts that can be delivered through sort of this lens of sustainability of our operations. So I'm not going to go through each one of these topics, but I think it's you'll see some of these aspects highlighted in colors. In social, you see a few blue items, and in environmental, you see a few orange or yellow items. These are items where we've also attached goals and targets to the specific and very material issues for our company. So in the next slide, if we move ahead, just as again, a bit of a busy slide, but just to give you an idea of where I think we're putting our attention in terms of long and medium term goals. So we have what we know as sort of these innovation and digitalization goals that are looking to deliver by 2025 some really tangible outputs when it comes to R&D, data management, and innovation within our company. The division of innovation was created at CMPC sort of at a corporate level around a year and a half to 2 years ago. Prior to that, each business unit had basically their innovation teams and agenda, but really there wasn't perhaps a sort of overall corporate look into where the landscape of R&D and innovation was heading at a global scale. What are those mega trends? What are the things that we need to sort of be looking at, not down in the business unit, but as a company as a whole? When it comes to our people, we have started with some pretty ambitious goals when it comes to inclusion and diversity of our own people. We are hoping to expand these sort of social goals into areas that have to do with our broader sort of stakeholder base. And then in environmental aspects, I think we're covering those most material issues for our sector, which have to do with water, GHG emissions, and waste. And we're also adding a very nice goal when it comes to protection and conservation of native and natural forests by 2030. So you'll see some of the progress that we've done by the end of 2020. I think in general, numbers are looking pretty good. There's a lot of work behind the actual performance and delivering, especially on those targets that we've set for 2025. So I'm very happy to see that 2 years after the announcement of these goals, today we have a company that's really as a whole behind these goals and supporting from the different roles and areas in different ways to the achievement of these very ambitious yet realistic targets. We've launched last year a project called Beyond, which is really this idea of looking at the next 100 years of our company and where do we see ourselves heading towards. What are those societal megatrends? What are the, as Joaquin was mentioning, what are going to be the needs of the consumer of the future? Yet also, what do we want to do as members of the company? Where do we see ourselves being strong, and where do we see ourselves more invested in as members of the company? So through Beyond, we've launched a number of very revolutionary projects that are looking into these sort of ideas of development that are going to be key to remain very active and sort of leading the way in terms of sustainability as we move into, these decades coming ahead. So I wanted to stop here for a second in sort of this idea of creating. So this is sort of the C within our corporate purpose, where we look at what do we do at CMPC. It's not how we do it, but it's a little bit more about what we do. And this first line here, I think is looking in a way to sort of those attributes that are, inherent to the forest sector and the pulp and paper sector, timber sector. We are working with renewable and natural materials, right? So we have an essential and fundamental condition that I think makes our sector particularly well prepared to confront the demands of, environment protection and better well-being of people as we move into the future. And as we know, in a planet that has 7 billion people and projected to have close to 10 by 2050, these challenges of enhancing well-being, growing, and larger population, yet doing all of this within boundaries of finite resources is probably the biggest challenge that we're facing today as humanity. So we are in a key sector that has that ability of growing and responding to this challenge in a sustainable way. So we can do this, perpetually if we do it the right way. Circular models are absolutely key in our sector. We, as CMPC, one of our subsidiaries is the largest recoverer, recycler of materials in Chile, particularly when it comes to paperboard, cardboard, and print and writing papers that are reused within our corrugated and other packaging plants, as well as our tissue paper making machines. This is also going to perhaps move into a very different and challenging space, as with the pandemic, of course, we've seen a lot of offices shutting down, and the demand has grown. It's scarcer than ever was before. So this is driving innovation and sort of pushing the company to look in what sort of a role do we have to have in terms of sort of this circular model that's kind of really been always in the DNA of our company, and is part of those key resources and materials that we use normally within our operations. I think the bio sort of economy, the concept of an economy that's based on what nature delivers, is also a key aspect, and it ties in very closely to this idea of circular. So circular, but based on fossil fuel materials, is not particularly the way we want to go. So we need circularity, yet we need it to be bio-based. So these two ideas have now merged into what is known as sort of the circular bioeconomy, which means we actually need both things. We need to stop thinking linear, and at the same time, we need to stop thinking fossil fuel based, right? So this is, I think, a huge area that's going to expand in next years, and we're going to see all sorts of solutions going from some sort of still pretty simple and basic solutions to very advanced composites and solutions in areas like aerospace and in other areas where you would typically not conceive or imagine sort of the role of fiber-based products being a key player. We also want to make sure that we're enhancing that ability to do good to people, right? So, and I think particularly our tissue business is well positioned to deliver products that are quite essential to sort of basic needs of people, and take care of hygiene solutions for all ages. Now, particularly last year and in this year, we've really strengthened our ability to deliver some solutions that have to do with the pandemic. And I think that the response that we've presented to many of our clients in terms of quickness, in terms of manufacturing locally, in terms of using the physical space and the knowledge of our teams to deliver these solutions very quickly has been really an example worldwide. And lastly, I mean, innovation. Again, I don't want to stop again here, and we'll have another slide where we're going to discuss a little bit more about ventures and other concepts that are being developed within our innovation team. But this is something that is here to stay, and I think something extremely relevant to share with customers and clients as we move ahead. Perhaps an area where we've been timid in the past, and we definitely don't want to be timid, and we want to make sure that innovation is a key feature attribute of our products as we move ahead. So I mentioned a little bit about sort of this idea of long-term partnerships, global partnerships, collaboration. Sustainability is definitely a challenge to deliver. It has many dimensions. It's complicated, it's moving, it's dynamic. Yet I think being a part of some initiatives that are global, that are impactful, is always important. We definitely learn a good deal by being a part of these collaborate efforts, and at the same time we get to highlight those things where we're doing good, and I think that's good for the entire value chain. And it also, I think, pushes those members perhaps of our sector that are lagging, and that in some cases even give our sector a bad reputation, a bad name. So you sometimes see these images of trees going down or deforestation, and the entire sector kind of gets thrown into that same bag. And we want to make sure that we highlight those efforts that are being driven by leading companies. So within the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, sort of the leading organization that's looking at sustainable development within the private sector globally, they are based in Geneva and Switzerland. There's a sector initiative called the Forest Solutions Group, and there's something like 15, I think, core members where we have large names globally, and particularly in the US, we have IP and Weyerhaeuser just joined. We have Hancock Renewable Resource Group, and then Europe with Mondi, with Stora Enso, Japan with Sumitomo Forestry, and Latin America particularly is represented by CMPC. And I think we're producing very relevant and interesting materials there. A few years ago, we drafted a 4-sector SDG roadmap. So how we believe the sector can deliver on the ambition and those gaps within the SDGs. We issued a circular bioeconomy report with help of Boston Consulting Group last year, which sort of sets a scene of where this is going and how our sector, amongst other sectors, can be key players in really driving a circular bioeconomy. And we're also participating now. We've just started a few months ago in the development of another roadmap that has to do with how our sector can become a net zero sector. So we're currently working on a common narrative. So what does net zero mean for our sector? Which is not trivial, really, because when you think about it, yes, we have emissions, yet at the same time, we have the ability to capture carbon through our forests, and we have the ability to store carbon through our products. So there's an interesting narrative that we're building today, and we're actually hoping to launch this officially at COP26 in Glasgow later this year in November. And the second part of this is then drafting an actual roadmap of how companies in our sector can deliver on that idea of net zero. We're also working on the development of the land sector and removals guidance of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is really the leading protocol globally on how companies must report on their CO2 emissions. Okay, so this has sort of always been a gray area, and I think with this work, we will be able to really understand how we can both account for those emissions that we might be producing within our operations and value chain, yet at the same time really understand the science and the reporting around carbon sequestration, carbon capture, and how these must be measured and reported on globally, which really is important to set the standards and really feeds actually in very nicely into this idea of net zero. How do we report on net zero is key to have this guidance of the protocol. So we're actually in the advisory committee of this work, and we hope to have the final product by Q4 of 2022. So within this roadmap for the SDGs, we've sort of created a joint vision of where we are today as a sector and where we think we should be by 2030, where we have opportunities and where we have impacts that we need to take care of. So we've developed as a group a set of KPIs. These, of course, are just a few examples, perhaps some of the most meaningful numbers that we can see there. But I think it's very important that we look at things like, for example, in working forest, how many of these forests are certified under, the best practice certifications globally? How much of our revenues are going into R&D in these companies, right? Perhaps there's a gap there. Where do we want to see ourselves? How do we compare to other sectors, perhaps oil and gas and other sectors that might be investing much more in R&D? So definitely an area where you want to sort of benchmark against other sectors and say, hey, there's still a huge opportunity for us to grow in these areas. In terms of circularity, how much of our fibers are actually of recycled or recovered content. Where are we heading in terms of mitigation of climate change and climate impacts? What are we doing in terms of water? We know particularly pulp is a very water intensive business. So we want to make sure that in the future, particularly with changing sort of rainfall and water availability in different watersheds, we want to make sure that we remain competitive and that we are not at risk when it comes to water availability or quality. And so forth on. So I think there's also an implementation report that was issued last year, which is sort of the first report on how we're doing as a group on these KPIs. And I think it's another tangible way of saying, you know what, we have a roadmap, we have a path. These are the keys that we're looking for, and we will make sure that we're held accountable. So we will be reporting on these key areas on a regular basis, and making sure that we are sort of delivering on those areas that we set out to do. So sort of getting towards the end here, I think when we look at future perspectives, I mentioned a little bit about this project called Beyond, right? So we're seeking to respond sort of to the sustainable consumer to the future. These ideas, this experience, this knowledge that we have in our company, we're trying to sort of all bring it up, boil it up, and really co-create a vision of future for our company. So a few key areas that we're looking at have to do with sustainable smart packaging, for example. You know, how do we engage with our clients? We have to have the client at the center, right? So these are things that we're looking into. How can we better achieve those objectives in the future? How data, how you know, AI and deep analytics can help us in being more efficient, more effective, better for the business, and at the same time better for the environment, right? New and agile ways of working. I mean, geez, the pandemic sent almost 5,000 people at CMPC to their homes from Friday to the next Monday. And I'm sure a lot of you might have seen similar situations within your own contexts. But we are sort of moving into a world where the way of working might change. And this not only at sort of administrative or you know, sort of jobs, but also in plants. You know, how does automation sort of play a role within our plants and within our products and what we can deliver? You know, what does that mean for the people that are working in our plants? It's safer, yet we might have, you know, some jobs that are kind of in the line there. So where do we see those people going within our company? We've also created within the innovation division this CMPC Ventures, where we hope to team up with startups around the globe that are really sort of driving sort of this quick, agile in innovation and research into key areas that we believe that we are better prepared to have a participation in. So as a large company, we're not perhaps the best to deliver quick turnaround and devote very specific, you know, R&D into these areas, but we're looking into new use of wood. We just teamed up with a very interesting startup based here in Chile that has to do with shaping timber fibers and creating products that really you can use wood in ways that we haven't seen before. Very, very interesting, and mimicking sort of the way that nature works. We're looking into textile fibers. How do we replace plastic in different forms in, you know, mass retail and other uses? New ways of looking at lignin and nanocellulose, et cetera, et cetera. So I think very interesting things coming out and ahead with CMPC Ventures. We also just finalized another venture with a small manufacturer of laminated timber in the south of Chile to create this new company called New Form, which is really going to look into developing new innovative timber-based solutions for the construction sector. So we're hoping to really expand the use of timber within commercial and residential space in Latin America in coming years. Now, kind of shifting a little bit, I think another very important aspect to mention on very quickly is that, as I said at the very beginning, we want to make sure that sustainability at CMPC is strategic and is core part of our business. I think a way of also proving this is really tying sustainability to sort of how we have access to capital and how we actually get rated and perform in terms of our typical financial instruments. So we started in 2017 with a pretty innovative and groundbreaking idea, at least in Chilean markets, and we issued a green bond in the New York Stock Exchange for $500 million, which was the first green bond of a Chilean company. The next year, we issued the first green bond in Peru. The next year, a couple instruments, green bond in Chile and a syndicated loan with Japanese banks. Last year, we signed the first sustainability-linked loan. And this year, a few months ago, we issued the first SLB, which is a sustainability-linked bond, also issued in the US Stock Exchange for $500 million as well. And what's really interesting of this last one is that the actual rate of the bond is tied to our performance in two of our environmental goals. So how we do in terms of curbing our CO2 emissions and how we do in terms of reducing our water intensity in our plants has to do with the rate that this bond is going to be reassessed in 5 years' time. So very interesting. We actually got the best issuance rate of a bond for CMPC ever with this issuance. So a sign that there's a lot of attention within the investor community into these new types of instruments that not only guarantee a good return or a safe investment for those investors, but also it checks the box on those investors that are trying to make sure that this is aligned with the expectations of their client bases in terms of putting those funds into investments that also do good for the environment or society. We have no specific agenda for the future in terms of green financing, but I think at this point, without really setting out to do it, we've become a bit of a leader in the space, at least in Latin America. So for sure, with good results and good experience in terms of green financing, most likely we will continue to push in that direction if the right market conditions are available. And lastly, I think we'd like to touch on a few sort of ESG indices and recognitions. I think it's not, we don't show this to say, hey, look at us. We have all these different recognitions and awards and prizes, but really I think we show this to as a sign of consistency. I mean, when all these big names like the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices or MSCI in the US or in Europe, FTSE for Good or Vigeo Eiris are all kind of putting you within this segment of leadership, I think is just a strong sign that gives all of our value chain and everybody being engaged with a sort of a peace of mind that what we're saying is by no means sort of a greenwashing strategy. There's a lot of time, there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of work that goes into what sort of I've been talking about today. And I think these recognitions in a way just say, hey, we've done independent assessments that look at ESG sort of performance from a diverse set of methodologies, and the overall assessment here is that our company is really up there with leading practices at a global level. So I think, again, there's still a lot of things that we need to do, but at least this is a really kind of nice a reminder that we are heading in the right direction, and that there's confidence in that what we're doing is actually, you know, happening on the ground, and every year we are looking into how we can do things a little bit better. Some of these things take a long time to sort of change, especially when we're looking at things that have to do with physical aspects of our plant or operations, or we rely on suppliers or other parts of the value chain that are in some cases much larger than we are. Of course, those things might take a while, but at least I think we're looking at this with a very strong sort of 360 approach, and making sure that all our different stakeholder groups are confident that we understand that we're in a path of constructing sort of these collaborative efforts that create value, again, to everyone that's involved. I think that is it. Yes, that's it for today. So thanks again for listening to this quick presentation.